Nirodhamanutpadamanutchedamashashvatam Anekathamananarthamanagamam Yah pratitya samutpadam prapanchopashamam shivam Deshayamasa sambuddhastam vande vadatam varam. Welcome back to our Dharmapada teaching. From today we will always include a meditation practice into the session so that it doesn't remain only theoretical. And we will share the meditation technique that goes back all the way to the Buddha. Now first, the Buddha says that if one meets a wise person who speaks rebukingly, that means who points out faults, your faults, a wise person who can see your faults, like someone revealing treasures, then one should attend to such a wise one. Attending to such people is always for better, not for worse. And such a person should admonish you. He should advise you. And he or she should remain in a way that helps you understand your own limitation, thus allowing you to restrain yourself from evil. Such a person is beloved to those who are of good nature and is not agreeable to those who are of evil nature. Naturally, because when we are of evil nature and someone points out our own faults, we don't like it. One should not associate with evil companions, but rather attend to virtuous friends. Associate only with the virtuous. This is a teaching that people in modern times don't necessarily like, nor do they see the truth in it. I've mentioned on a previous occasion also that we really become similar to the people we associate with. There's always some commonality. Even the very choice we make of associating with them shows that there is something in us that connects to that which is in them. Thus you can know a man or a woman by the friends they associate with. You can at least know partially a little bit about their innermost character. And this is not about judging, but it is about the difference between foolish compassion and wise compassion. Whom do we choose as our companions, as the people we wish to shape us? Makes a huge, huge difference, the choice you make concerning the people you associate with. Just as irrigators, people who create water channels, allow water to be conveyed, just as arrow makers make sharp arrows that can then be shot, just as carpenters shape wood, forming it into furniture and other pieces that are useful, exactly like that, the wise ones master themselves. The Buddha asks us to work on ourselves, not to just live, not to just see ourselves as passive participants in life. Life is happening to me rather than I can work on myself. When you realize that you have a certain degree of capacity to work on your mind, it is a marvelous discovery. A little bit raising our concentration levels, for instance, allows us to some degree to change the state we have from, let us say, a doom, brooding, negative state to a positive state. For example, when we engage in the practice of metta, maitri, with concentration, we sense at some point that our state changes. And this shows us we can actually work on ourselves. Just as a carpenter works on the wood, we don't just have to be passive experiencers. We can actively work on ourselves. And just like a solid rock is not moved by the wind, exactly like that, the wise ones are not moved by blame or by praise. Blame and praise are two sides of the spectrum, and very often they fall into each other, meaning it's like a pendulum. Be careful of someone who praises you a lot, because it can fall to the other side. Or likewise, when you admire someone excessively, then you also have to be careful, because then it means your attention is idealizing that person, and then very often it can fall to the other side when you suddenly discover some faults or you perceive something to be a fault. So blame and praise are two extremes that we must be careful with. Just like a deep, serene, and pristine lake, exactly like that, the wise ones become serene upon hearing the teachings of Dharma and implementing them. The saintly abandon everything. The saintly do not complain. They show neither elation nor dejection when they encounter happiness or suffering. Having abandoned the negative state, let the wise person develop the positive state. Having left the dwelling and arrived at homelessness, solitude free from desires. What this means is that leaving our dwelling, of course, can be an outer activity. Nowadays, it's a little more difficult to leave our dwelling and become homeless. It's maybe not recommended for you in the United Kingdom and elsewhere. But here there is also an inner meaning that when we leave our rigid patterns, the box we live in, our rigid convictions, our rigid personality structure, and when we open our heart, our consciousness to something that is so vast, our true nature, that it is unbounded, that everything can have its place there, even the negative things, even negative phenomena, even negative people, negative emotions, they are allowed to be there in that space of boundless awareness, we can call it. Then we truly develop an abiding positive state. This is the dilemma, or this is the interesting thing, that if we cling to the positive and we want to avoid the negative, it doesn't happen. We don't achieve the positive. But if we leave our rigid patterns, if we leave our rigid thought structures, attachments, if we leave them and we open ourselves unboundedly to everything, basically, then, strangely, a deep, profound positivity arises. A deep serenity. This is what we call equanimity. This is why the teaching of the Buddha's Dharma then brings a coolness to our heart. Not the coolness of a wrapper, but a true coolness. A sense of cool. And it is then like a lake. You can throw a stone in the lake and it causes some ripples, but the lake remains itself. And free from attachment, the wise person thus purifies himself or herself of the afflictive states, the afflictive emotions. You remember that the afflictive emotions are strongly liking or preferring, wanting, desiring, and then on the other hand, strongly aversion, a strong aversion, not wanting, not preferring, then pride or conceit, feeling oneself to be above others, and its opposite, jealousy or envy, feeling to be below others. And the aversion in its strongest form is anger, and desire in its strongest form is obsession. So these basic emotions, they cause all the troubles. So when we open our heart, our awareness, and make it vast like the sky, allowing everything to be present without clinging, without attachment, then we can begin to work on these afflictive emotions by being aware of them, by again and again seeing what they cause and how they mainly cause trouble. Seeing this again and again without attachment removes the blemishes from us. It removes the deepest clinging slowly, slowly, and thus we can learn to rest in our own present awareness, deeper and deeper, which is like a lake, or even one example is that it is like an ocean. The waves come, the waves of experience come and go. They come and they go. This is what we will practice afterwards. Now, some stories. The Buddha said that a wise person who rebukes you, who sees your faults and reveals them to you, like revealing treasures, such a wise person is really somebody you should attend to. You should really listen to them. Attending to such a wise person is for better, not for worse. And here there is a story when Buddha was residing at the Jetavana monastic garden. There was a poor old Brahmin by the name of Radha, and he was staying at the monastic garden doing small services for the monks and nuns. And for these services, he was provided with food, clothing, and other needs. But strangely, no one encouraged him to really become part of the monks and nuns, even though he had a strong desire to be part. And perhaps one reason was that it was very comfortable for the monks and nuns that they had a kind of servant. You don't want to lose that servant, so it's better to keep him in his role. And remember, there were hundreds of monks and nuns around the Buddha, so once in a while he would use his perceptive vision, and he perceived this poor old Brahmin and knew that he had tremendous potential to realize his true nature. So the Buddha went to the old man and learned from him that the monks and nuns of the monastic garden didn't want him to become a real practitioner. So the Buddha thought that he could use this situation to teach everyone. So he called all the monks and nuns together and asked them, "Is there anyone here who can think of some good that this old man has done to them?" And after all, he had always provided services to them, so clearly one of his disciples, Sariputra, replied, "Oh, Venerable Sir, yes, I do recollect when he offered me rice." And then the Buddha said, "Well, if that is so, shouldn't you help your benefactor to get liberated from the ills of life? That if he has been serving you rice, shouldn't you in turn help him become liberated from the ills of life?" And Sariputra was deeply ashamed that he had not made an effort to give him teachings. So he agreed and taught the old man in private meditation sessions how to concentrate, how to pay attention to the breathing process, how to pay attention to the emotions, to the sensations, to all the states. And within a relatively short time, the old man attained the first stage of enlightenment. And thus the Buddha was joyful and explained to everyone that they should never take any criticism of his as a personal attack, but rather that it is good to accept when a wise person tells you your mistake. It is always for the benefit of everyone. And in turn, the Brahmin Radha took the situation with great serenity, was not upset by anyone, and seized the moment, the opportunity, when it was offered. So, similarly, don't cling to blame either. When we feel as a victim, you remember this at the very start of the Dharmapada, when we feel as a victim, then we also close ourselves to wisdom. So no doubt, even monks and nuns or great practitioners might knowingly or unknowingly treat us in a way that we don't feel inspired. But then when the situation changes and someone does grant us teachings, we shouldn't cling to the previous version of it. You see? Never cling to any version of your experience with people. Every moment give someone a new chance. Then your door for wisdom is wide open. And then you remember the example, those who build water channels allow water to be conveyed. Similarly, arrow makers make sharp arrows which can be shot, and carpenters shape the wood. Thus, the wise ones can master themselves, they can work on themselves. There was a young son of a gentleman in Shravasti, and everyone called him Pandit Ji or Pandita, and he became a novice practitioner at quite a young age. Not a monk, but someone who just wants to see how it is and get a taste of the life of a practitioner of meditation. So he was following Sariputta, one of the Buddha's main disciples, on an alms round. And there he saw some farmers channeling water into their fields. So he saw that and took it as an inspiration and asked Sariputta, can water, which has no consciousness, be guided to wherever one wishes? And Sariputta said, yes, it can be guided to wherever one wishes. Similarly, when they continued on their way, the young boy or the young man, the youth, saw some arrow makers who were heating the arrows and then straightening them. And he asked the same question, that the arrows have no consciousness, but they are forming them in such a way that the arrows can be directed the way we want to direct them. And then finally, they came across some carpenters who were cutting and sawing and molding the timber to make it into cartwheels. And he asked Sariputta that the wood has no consciousness, and yet they are making it into cartwheels that then can be directed wherever we want them to go. And through this process of observation, he came to realize that if water that has no consciousness can be guided to wherever one wishes, if arrows can be formed in such a way that they can be straightened and shot exactly as one wishes, and if timber or wood, which is without consciousness, can be made into something useful, shouldn't I, who have consciousness, be able to work on my mind and practice concentration and insight. Our mind is constantly filled with consciousness. It's a very interesting analogy. How is it that unconscious things can be formed in the way we want, but when it comes to our mind, we are reeling and, it's going hither and thither and, I can't do anything with it. I can't concentrate. I can't have any insight. It's a strange situation, isn't it? So taking this as his inspiration, he went to his room and he practiced concentration, contemplating a point in the body, what we call the abdomen, very specifically that point. And when it rises with the breath, he concentrated on the rising, and when it fell, he concentrated on the falling. This increased his concentration more and more, and thus he could gain insight into his own mind. And then we said that a wise one is like solid rock, not moved by the wind, not moved by blame or praise, neither extreme, not being active or motivated because of someone's approval, and also not in order to avoid blame. Especially in spiritual circles, very often a strange dynamic develops where secretly we begin to be spiritual because we want approval, whether it is from people around us, our fellow spiritual companions, or perhaps the guru, the teacher. Sometimes a strange dynamic develops. I always tell all of you that throughout my life I have been surrounded by spiritual people from the moment I was born to, unfortunately, the moment I will die. I can't escape them. So I know a lot about spiritual people. Very often they are worse than ordinary people. But this is not because spiritual people are somehow insane or not mentally well. Rather, this is because they actually look at themselves. At least they try. And it's better to die trying than not to do it at all. And you see, of course, the so-called ordinary person, there are no ordinary people, but it's just a term. The so-called ordinary people, they're so engrossed in their activities, their job, their girlfriend or wife, and so much engrossed in it that they never look at the mind. And thus it seems, or it can seem, that they are really well and everything's wonderful, and they go to the fitness gym and they do this and they do that, and always creating some activity to stay busy. Whereas the spiritual person is all over the place. Oh, my mind is like this, and oh, I'm so depressed, or oh, I'm so this, I'm so that. So then when you compare the two, you think, well, clearly spirituality doesn't work. The other one's much better off. But that's only because the other one has never looked at their mind. If they actually started looking at their mind, they would see too how agitated it actually is, how restless it actually is. So while externally it can seem that the spiritual person is actually less well off than the other person, it's not true from a path perspective, from a Dharma path perspective. But, as I said, there is this tendency sometimes, especially among spiritual people, to then create a different dynamic, which is very much based on praise and blame, or approval and criticism. And that's very, very unhealthy. Very unhealthy, where the guru, the teacher, becomes a father figure really secretly, or if it's a female teacher, a mother figure, and where we sort of regress into a state of a child. And I remember many years ago, I have a very good Guru Bhai, and many years ago I said that, for me, it's just all about the Divine Mother. I'm just her child my whole life. And then he said to me, seriously? You want to remain a child your whole life? So that was really a powerful statement, where you sort of realize, oh, yes, it's true. I'm creating a psychological personality here. I'm a baby, right? I'm a baby of the Divine Mother. Or I'm a baby of the Buddha. I never need to take any responsibility for myself or for my actions. I'm just a baby, right? It's a big problem. I mean, in spiritual, right? I mean, you're probably laughing now, but it's really how it is very often. So we must take responsibility for our own minds, for our path. And that is when the Buddha's path brings us equanimity. Not when we rely on someone else to somehow, guide us like donkeys, showing us some sugar. No, it's not like that. We are not donkeys. We're not children. So let us take responsibility for our own states. Let us take responsibility for our own minds, for our own emotions, and practice the Buddha's path of meditation. So now the teaching part is finished, and I would request all of you to prepare yourself for a meditation. We'll do 15 minutes. The Buddha's meditation method is known as Satipatthana Vipassana, and each meditation session is usually structured into 4 parts. First, there is a mindful prostration, which we will not do now, but we will learn this in the next retreat, one-day retreat, which we will do in April on the 24th. So it begins with a mindful prostration, a very slow mindful prostration. And then comes the sitting part. That is what we will do today. And then it is followed by a slow walking meditation and ends with Maitri or Metta. So each meditation session has these 4 parts. But today we will only do the sitting part. The Lord Buddha taught that when we sit, we should pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath. This is called Pranapana Sati, Pranapana Smriti in Sanskrit. This is the beginning of the Buddha's way of meditating. Is to pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath, and to do this by focusing with great concentration on your navel. When you concentrate on your navel, you can sense how the abdomen rises when you inhale and how it automatically contracts when you exhale. But it is very important not to control your breathing. The idea is not to breathe like this, and to be totally trying to control that, but rather to be mindful of it, to be aware of it, to concentrate on the navel while the breathing happens. I request you now, and I know that maybe for some of you it is the first meditation of this type. Please just have patience. To sit totally unmoving, like a mountain. Not to move in the next 15 minutes. I know it might be a little difficult, but not to move. And only to pay attention, to concentrate on the navel. And to pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath. Rising, falling. You just pay attention to this for the next 15 minutes, knowing this is the beginning of the Buddha's path of meditation. Don't move. Don't scratch yourself. Don't go like this. Don't go into your ear. Don't pick your nose, even if you want to. Just sit unmoving. Nothing can happen to you when you do this. All right? 15 minutes. And we briefly send out metta or maitri towards all beings. Open our heart to all beings without any bias and wish them well. May they be happy and at ease. So, this is called Satipatthana Vipassana. The Buddha's way of meditating begins like this. If there are any questions, free to ask now, and in the retreat next month we will go through the Satipatthana Vipassana in great detail, exactly how to practice it so that you are equipped also with this method, which is that of the Buddha himself and is time-tested, very, very established in producing wonderful spiritual results. It's one of my aspirations to equip you with this method so that we can then let you loose on the world and that you have this with you all the time. It's a wonderful way to come out of any situation. It's to come back to pranapana smriti, or just in-breath and out-breath, to come back to that, to make it our home. This is what the Buddha's teaching is, to make it our home. So someone asks, could you explain the difference between aversion and what was mentioned last time about keeping a gentle distance from some situations and people? It's a very good question. And it's very subtle also, because recognizing that certain types of people are not good for you, for your path, for your development, for your happiness, and aversion can sometimes be closely related. Recognizing that a companion is not virtuous can be simply through seeing what happens when this person is in my presence or when I am in their presence. And when you observe this, or when you are interacting, now in COVID, nobody is in anyone's presence, right? So when we interact with them, if you gently observe in yourself what happens, is your mind going into a sense of uplifting, into a sense of wishing to know deeper about your true nature, or about Dharma, or about compassion, about positive values? Or does your mind go into a spiral where you become negative, you become aggressive, you become irritated all the time? You can observe this easily. And it's not something you should decide upon in just a minute or a day. It's something you have to see over some time. And then when you see that over some time, you should apply wise compassion, not foolish compassion. Foolish compassion then says that the Buddha's compassion is infinite, therefore I should now endure all this negative influence. I should just endure it and dedicate myself to that person's emotions, to always being there and being pulled down into the swamp, so to speak. That is foolish compassion. Whereas wise compassion is, after close, deep observation, to see this makes no sense. I can't actually help this person. That person only pulls me down, and I am not able to pull them up at all. And you see, this is where I think is exactly the difference between a wise person and a not wise person. And most people come under the category of not wise, unfortunately, including most of us, including myself, in many situations. We then continue. We continue. And that is just attachment. And it is just not wisdom, you see. It's not true compassion, either to yourself nor to the other person. Why? Because you're not helping the other person by being pulled down into a spiral. You are just spiraling with them. You see? And this is really the point where you have to overcome that attachment and realize, no, it doesn't make sense. You move on. And you see what occurs sometimes when you just are able to let go. Very often, these entanglements that you have with others resolve and help the others to also move on. You sometimes think you are the great savior and you have to help everyone and you have to save everyone, but in reality you are part of the problem. So this is where the Buddha asks us to become truly compassionate and not foolish compassion. Yes? Someone says that it felt good, meaning the meditation practice. It is the longest time I have sat and just focused on the breathing. Yes, very good. And part of this is really to totally sit like a mountain and not to scratch yourself and not to wiggle around and not to do this and that and to pick your nose. And it's not that I see you picking your nose, but I know that that's what people do. Or to you feel the urge, my ear, I just want to go like this, right? And just to endure that is powerful in itself. Really, it's very powerful to just endure and totally observe. Focus on the navel, how it rises and falls. We're almost finished. Someone asks, is this practice in Hindu scriptures too? Yes, in fact, it is right there in the Bhagavad Gita. Apani juhvati pranam, prane panam tathapari. So, but sort of very cryptically formulated. But yes, it's right there, absolutely. And in the Yoga Sutras, Yoga Shastras, it's all there. Here, I want to give you the Buddha's formulation of it, because we are studying his Dharmapada, and it is beautiful to have the full package of the Buddha's practice, because then it gives you this rock inside. You know, this is what he taught. This is what we are practicing. And of course, there are many other practices, and we also talk about those very often, but I really want to give you that here, you see, so that you have that practice and you know, all right, that's the Buddha's practice. In times of crisis, even I always tell Tripura that when my emotions are a little bit like this, what really helps the fastest, strangely, is not these other energetic practices, which we have, but really this practice. It helps strangely. Maybe it's something, my karma, I don't know, but this practice helps me the fastest. Whereas all the other mantras and all those things, they are wonderful, but somehow they don't help me that quickly. This one, instantly. So You see, that's why I want to give you the full package, so you can practice all the other practices you have learned as well, but you also have this. So someone says, so I could concentrate on my breathing, but there were thoughts coming again and again. Oh yes, the thoughts will come like waves, and they go like waves. All you need to do is to remain like a rock and to come back with your attention, your concentration onto the navel and the rising and the falling. That's all you need to do. No other instruction. The next question maybe we can cover next time about, do we choose family on past karmas? It's a very long question. So I will note it down and we will cover it next time. So for now, I wish you a wonderful weekend. See you in 2 weeks.